As he poured forth his passionate feelings, compounded of love, regret, guilt, and a desperate plea to her, to God, and to the whole world, for forgiveness. "He is cleansing his soul," Father Clooney had whispered, "getting it ready for heaven." She heard it all, and she knew that those final words of Jack's would stay with her until she herself died. Then in the early evening, his life drew to its dribbling and devastating end. When she heard his last breath, long and rattling, she buried her head, cursing God and all the unfairness of life, and refused to pray, even when Father Clooney came down from the ward to comfort her. Later, after the priest had escorted her home, she spent her first night alone. She hadn't slept, of course. There were too many memories swarming inside her head like a hive of bees violently shaken, the honey destroyed, and the stings many and painful. But in the dull grey of morning, she rose and moved to the window, where a bird was whistling on the window ledge outside. It stood there, its head cocked to one side, and stared at her defiantly, issuing a sharp chirp, but remaining where it was. She turned away, and, with the drizzly light fighting its way into the room, she caught a glimpse of herself in the looking-glass, where the black crape covered the glass. Her final act before climbing into bed had somehow slipped down to reveal a sliver of reflection in the centre. Nothing but pale, sickly features stared back. Then she caught her breath, watched herself slowly bring a hand to her throat, as if she were finding it difficult to breathe. She glanced around the small room, looked up at the half-open curtains that hung limp and undisturbed by any breeze sneaking through the locked frames. She noticed the window-sill was empty now. The bird had gone. Then she turned back to the mirror and looked into her wild eyes. That was when it all began. Chapter 1. There were 3 people sitting around the small table, their eyes fixed on the bare candle flame that swayed gently to and fro. There was no other light in the room, for the curtains had been drawn, and their thickness kept out the dim glare of the gaslight across the street. No fire was lit, thus avoiding the accidental flicker of shadows that might take the group's attention away from the flare of the flame. Thin wisps of smoke drifted upwards, but once they left the wick of the candle, they quickly vanished into the darkness that pressed on them, leaving only the acrid smell and the occasional sizzle from the molten wax. "I'm bloody freezing," said one of them, an old woman whose face, weathered and creased, looked even paler than normal in the feeble glow from the candle's flame. "They'd best be doing, or I'm off." The one she addressed her comments to sat, as she had done for the last 10 minutes, with her head bowed low, her hands clasped together on the table as if in prayer. She said nothing, but the woman seated to her right, sharp-eyed, with a firm set to her jaw, leaned towards the old woman and hissed, "She's not a bloody dog in a sideshow, Peggy. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes our Jack comes. It's not our Alice's fault. Spirits are a law unto themselves." Old Peggy Clayford sniffed. She'd lost her husband Matthew 2 years ago, when the black lung took him, and since then she'd become used to the solitude of her tiny terraced house, glad of the company of neighbours when they called round, but equally glad when they shut the door on the way out. It took a while for the pungent aroma of his pipe smoke to fade, and finally leave the house, even though his memory was brought back on occasion whenever she walked past a pub and caught the whiff of tobacco drifting into the night. The silence of her house, enhanced by the sizzle and crack of the coals as the flames took hold, the hollow tock of the grandfather clock in the corner, the creak of the rafters in the attic, all of these sounds were like the comfort of a blanket to old Peggy, reminders of a solitariness she'd become used to and even treasured. Sometimes she even imagined he was lying beside her in the still of the night, and will